Hey guys, what's up? Today we're going to be going off into the weeds a little bit. I was asked a question a while back about whether or not I use Etsy, eBay, things like that. And the answer is yes, I do. I buy a lot of the parts that I use to repair things off of eBay. And, eBay has always been really, really good to me. And for handmade items that I need, boots, coats, belts, just all sorts of things, glasses, frames, even, I have a tendency to use Etsy because everything, well, back then at least, everything was made by hand. And so for today's video, we're going to be covering Etsy itself. I don't know if I'm going to be doing a video on eBay because I personally have never really had any issues with it. Returns have always gone very smoothly. It's very, very robust compared to Etsy. So with Etsy, I primarily had known it for handmade goods. It seems like in the last 2 years, it's kind of been taken over by drop shippers and people selling things off of Alibaba and just all kinds of crazy stuff. It's not really quite what it used to be. Over my entire time going and using Etsy as a buyer, I have never had any issues. I've always been able to, if an order was running late, I was always able to work with the seller very closely to go and get it resolved. I had never had to have ever left any negative feedback towards anybody. If I went and sent a message, people were always very kind and courteous. And so I found that over the last year and a half, things on Etsy have kind of degraded a fair bit. So the common thing that I hear about Etsy is, oh, sellers always have to watch out for the buyers. The buyers are always trying to scam them. Sellers are always being scammed. And for the first time ever, I had an issue of my own, which seemed kind of scammy. So a little bit of a background. I wound up ordering a bunch of PS Vitas. They were supposed to be modded and have a very specific game library on it for me and my girlfriend's daughter to enjoy, as well as my girlfriend herself. And so we had shopped around Etsy a little bit looking for a shop that would actually go and do the work. And we had actually gone and found a shop. And I had reached out to this man and I was like, hey, I got this list of games. Can you go ahead and put just these games on it? And the man said yes. So, what we're going to be going ahead and doing today is going over the sketchy practices and going over how sellers will sometimes manipulate the review system as well as the report and message system to try to get it to their advantage. And we're going to talk about how things have degraded the last while. We're going to be going through photographs of the item that I'd received as well as messages, and then go over the end result of what had happened. So I went ahead and I had ordered the Vita for my kid. And I was just kind of really excited for it, I think, because I had already made her a DS that was already modded out and stuff, but with Vita as being very finicky, I wanted to leave it in somebody else's hands because I just didn't want the aggravation that came with it. So I went ahead and when I had ordered it, there was stuff that was kind of wrong right off the bat. The guy had a lot of sketchy mannerisms and stuff when it came to actually going and placing the order. And then with shipping, I couldn't really get a straight answer either because first he told me he would send it via postal. Then he told me that it would be sent via UPS. And then after like almost 2 weeks of radio silence, he said that he would send it via FedEx. And then there was also an issue where he didn't know, well, he claims that he didn't know how to send the item because I have a post office box. And then finally, I had to explain how hybrid services work as well as what the P.O. box is and the difference between hybrid services in a P.O. box versus using a ground courier to get your items. And so we had gotten it shipped. On arrival, it was a little bit of a train wreck. The first thing that I had noticed right off the bat is that it was having issues with the screen. And when you go and you look at it, you can very easily see the imperfections. You know, you got some right there, you got a little bit over there, you know, like it basically stretched all over the place. You got a streak there, one that carves all the way down here, but since it's a little bit darker, it's not as easy to see because it's being camouflaged by the 20. Then a little bit up there, and then it scrapes all the way past here. The front of the Vita was fine. There wasn't any damage to that outer glass, but the OLED panel inside of it was definitely screwed up, and then you got a little bit over here, and then some of it that branches up there. The entire bottom left corner was pretty trashed, and then the center of the screen wasn't really doing too well either, you know. And so I went ahead, and with orders like this, I have a tendency to document them. You know, if I notice something, I pull out my phone, I'll take a photo of it. I don't really care. You know, I just have a tendency to go, oh, okay, you know, we need to go and keep an eye on this and everything else. And then I had noticed that the back of it was carved up as well. And so what you're looking at is basically the back here. It has all this erosion, and then it has a bunch of deep gashes and a lot of damage throughout this entire left-hand side of the panel. And then this is just the sticker. It's not really anything special, but this panel is how you go and you do touch controls on the Vita. And so a lot of Vita games actually require that you go and use this for auxiliary controls, more or less. And so the other side of the panel, as far as I could tell, was fine. With this side, though, when I went to go up ladders on Uncharted, when we were going and playing around with it a fair bit, you know, when I was sitting in the technician's office, it wasn't really registering too well at all. We tried cleaning it and made it a little bit better, but all these heavily eroded zones weren't really that functional, you know, and so it was kind of creating problems left and right. And so this is a slightly better shot that I tried to get where, as you can see, there's just gashes across the back and heavy amounts of erosion there and there and there and there and there. The entire back is torn up so badly that you can literally go and get your fingernail stuck in the plastic. And then, of course, on the other side, there was heavier amounts of erosion and stuff, but it was still kind of a little bit heavy on the right side as well, but the right side was way more functional. So I had called a friend of mine. William and I have been friends for quite some time. He was the man that actually taught me how to go and run repairs on various items and stuff. He taught me how to solder. He taught me how to read a multimeter. If it wasn't for this man, I would not be able to repair anything at all. And even when I had lost the majority of my vision, he was always really, really cool about it and said, that's okay. There's other ways that we can go and teach you how to repair things. We've got microscopes and everything else. So I had reached out to him and I said, hey man, I'm having a couple of issues here and there, and this Vita is not really Vita-ing too well. And so he laughed a little bit, and it was before his afternoon rush, which is when he sees the most amount of people. In the morning, it has a tendency to be very quiet because people are at like school or work, or so he was within walking distance, and I said, okay, I'll go ahead and bring it down. I went ahead and I brought it down, and he had quite literally gone and noticed the screen almost immediately, you know, and I quote, he said, God damn, what happened to your screen? It's damaged. And I said, I don't know, William. It just kind of was like that, you know. And he said, well, that's a damaged panel. The outside's fine, but the panel is damaged and it's very easy to see. And then he said the back panel was damaged as well. And so we went ahead and we plugged the Vita in to retrieve its serial and revision number because you can't find that in the OS. The bottom stickers on the bottom of the unit had peeled because the entire unit was extremely torn up on arrival, and so the stickers just weren't really sticking. That bottom sticker on the back was kind of peeling a little bit. So I wasn't able to find the serial sticker until I had searched the box later, and we never found the model designation sticker. So we plugged it in, and he pulled the entire build off of it and everything, and he said, well, this is going to be kind of expensive to repair. It would just be easier to go and reach out to the seller and send it back because you paid a pretty good amount of money for it, and there's no way that, you should be paying for it. If the housing is scratched, that's fine, but that panel is damaged and then the back is non-responsive. We had briefly tested it out on adrenaline and stuff, trying to get the back panel to register with finger presses and stuff. It wasn't really happening. So it was advised to reach out to the seller and to try to get a resolution, more or less, because there just wasn't really one in sight that wasn't extremely expensive. So I had reached out to the seller and I noticed that there was a lot of things wrong right off the bat. We were talking about where, it was going to go a fair bit. And as you can see here, it states that he's in the United Kingdom. But it turns out that he was actually in Europe instead. First he claimed that he was in London, then he claimed that he was in Leeds. But the further I got down the pipeline with it, I realized that this man was not reporting his zone correctly because of the tariffs that his country has. So I reached out to him, as you can see here, and the only thing that this does is goes over the various issues with it and stuff. I'd pointed out that, the games are on there, they work fine and everything, that the only thing that I'm really having a problem with is essentially the hardware, the screen and the back panel and stuff. And I point out that I've had it less than an hour, and at the time I'd reached out, I was still over at Bill's office and stuff, and I was in the front waiting area, and, he was going and starting to see other people, and I had reached out because I wasn't sure what we were going to do. I wasn't sure if it was going to get repaired, replaced, refunded, and so I had reached out, and as you can see, I sent pretty much all the photos and stuff, and he says there's absolutely no damage to it. This screen is like this. I've never seen a screen have damage like that and have somebody just say that it is. And so I don't, it's really weird because he says the touchpad is not even visible, but as you can see right there, I took a full-blown photo of it and stuff, and he kind of goes down the pipeline a fair bit. And so he's trying to tell me that the touchpad is only visible if the sticker's removed. The sticker is not meant to cover up the touchpad. And so he said that the issue is the adapter probably moved out, so you need to remove the adapter and the micro card, then put them together tightly and restart Vita. I don't see how that really correlates to a damaged screen or a non-responsive touchpad. And so we had issues as well with the Vita going, and every time I would plug it in and it would go to sleep, it would lock up. Well, at some point, I felt that my kid was, with the battery life of the Vita actually being extremely poor, I knew that she was going to go and plug it in to keep playing because 3 hours, she gets on a JRPG or something, she's going to want a game on it. She's going to want to do the long haul, which is fine. And so I flat out pointed out that I went ahead and compared the screen to another 1000 Vita, and the screen is clean, no weird streaks. I basically went through the entire troubleshooting and comparison steps to just kind of say, hey, there's something wrong here. And then we managed to actually go and get it to unstick while sleeping. If I held down the power button for an obscene amount of time, eventually the recovery menu would pop up and it would give me the option to shut it down. From what I understand, the recovery menu is supposed to take about 10 seconds of holding it down, not upwards of a minute. So I went ahead, and it was something that was seriously wrong with it and stuff. Every time I plugged it in, the light on the Vita would flash from blue to orange and then flicker, and I had pointed out that, the touchpad has to be functional, the screen has to be functional, especially with the amount that I was paying and stuff. And then I go on to talk about how, fingerprint registration needs to be accurate. And at first I thought it was me just fat fingering the keyboard on the screen, but even the front display was having problems with touch registration on keyboards. And So I sent some more photos about how badly the back of the Vita was torn up, and the gouges, and how you could stick a fingernail in there and stuff. And so he attempts to discredit me by saying that you showed me the lock screen when your Vita's been frozen. Yes, I took a photo of it when it had first booted up because, I noticed it like that. And so he says, I do have my end test results, which include running a screen test, a battery test, and a hardware test by various apps, and also serial numbers are noted for every console that I send out. So it's kind of weird because he's attempting to say, hey, I think you're being fraudulent with me. I ran a test, there's nothing wrong with the screen, but obviously you can see a lot of issues with the screen and the back, and even the rubber on the thumbsticks was pretty torn up and stuff and super sticky, but they were just old and I could have easily replaced those. And so, I don't really see the point of him mentioning, the serial numbers being noted because it directly insinuates that I'm trying to send him back a different model. And that wouldn't really work because while you can't find the serial number in the hardware build in the OS of the Vita, you can plug it into a computer and read it directly off of the data file. So it was really obnoxious. And so he goes on to talk about how, it went ahead and took 1.5 hours and he did this for a reason. And so he proceeds to lie to me and say that the modded Fat Vitas can glitch sometimes, not every time, screen freeze glitchy or no touch screen when plugged in and let the Vita go to sleep, never an issue. When playing or when the Vita is turned completely off, I also don't know why the technician didn't mention this. When Bill and I had spoken about it, I had brought up the freezing and the locking up, and he said that his only did that if it had a bad mod or a bad plugin applied to it. So either the mod job was bad or it didn't have, it had a plugin that wasn't really functioning quite right with it. This man went ahead and proceeded to say, hey, it doesn't have any plugins on it at all, so that means that the mod job was also bad then, I guess. And so that's how we figured it out, because we did look it up on the internet, which is kind of funny how he mentions that. And so with the gouge on the back, he, I guess, assumed that I was talking about the little line sticker. It kind of showed me that he was not willing to pay attention to any of these photos that I had sent him and stuff. And I guess it was just lost in translation. And so it doesn't really make up for the fact that it doesn't really make up for the fact that the touch panel was not doing it. We tried on games, we tried getting it to register on Adrenaline. We literally tried it with everything and stuff. And so then he attempts to discredit me again by saying that he doesn't want to seem rude, which I see people only really use that phrase when they're getting ready to do some stupid out-of-pocket shit but don't want to look like an asshole. And then he's like, I doubt you've been to this so-called technician. I also doubt that he diagnosed it by his eyes. And within minutes give you the same, and then there's like a blank there. Attach some pictures. I'd really like to see your comparison photos. And so the weird thing is you don't really need to hook it up to an advanced diagnostic to go and realize the issues. You can literally go, like a controller, mind you, press the back and see if its registration is going correctly. If you can't get it to register in games, if you can't even open up the firmware and get it to register on the input menu, then yeah, that tells you that something is wrong. And then you can go and also look at the back, see how heavily damaged it is, and then feel around to see what registers and what doesn't, and then realize very quickly that the zones that are heavily eroded don't have registration. And then with the screen and stuff, I think it's more of a clear-cut case of common sense. Because if you go and you have a really huge defect on your screen, you're not going to need a diagnostic for that. It's like somebody bringing their laptop to me and saying, I have this busted crystal display, what's wrong with it? We already know what's wrong with it. It's a problem with the panel. And since the front of the Vita didn't appear to be damaged or anything, it's a problem with the panel itself. It's not like it was damaged in shipping, because that would reflect on that glass face that it has. So it was very easy to kind of point that out. But yeah, he kind of went the extra mile and attempted to go and discredit me very, very quickly, instead of saying, okay, we'll go ahead and have a look at this, And then with all the photos I sent, you seriously would have thought that he would have had enough common sense to say, okay, something's wrong here. So he wanted me to go and attach some pictures, and he wanted me to go and compare it to another Vita. At this point, I was already on my way out the door because Bill is normally pretty busy and stuff, and I'm not going to constantly badger this man for the sake of being like, hey, can I go ahead and borrow your Vita, and then can we take a photo next to it? That way we can compare, because when the defects in the screen are that prominent and everybody can see them and everybody's asking what's wrong, you don't really need a comparison at that point because it's already so evident and in your face. So he sends me a bunch of photos and stuff. These panels here are in a hell of a lot better shape than what I had received. And I don't know what he was trying to do here by pointing out the sticker, because I wasn't referring to this damn thing. I was referring to the panel above it. And it was just kind of ridiculous, I think. And I don't really think he actually knew what he was trying to do with it and stuff, because I already had explained that it was the back touch panel. It's not the side grips, it's not the bottom sticker. It was just the back touch panel. So he then goes to AliExpress and I guess was trying to say, hey, here's a new label. But again, I didn't have problems with the label. It was the registration of the touch for the back panel of the unit. So I reply back, and I'm trying to be courteous about it. And I was like, yes, sir, I'm showing you the lock screen. Yes, the Vita does lock up every time I plug it in. When I booted it, the screen was the first thing I noticed. And then, I went on to document about how I document things and how well it's packaged and the condition of the box in case it's damaged in shipping, because that does happen, especially with FedEx in this damn country. And I point out what I'm referring to with the panel and stuff, and how it has chips and small holes and a few larger gouges, and then go over the problem with swiping and everything else. And then I point out that the digitizer on the front looks okay. And I also try to reassure him that I don't doubt that he was the first person to take the film off, because he was trying to pass it off as a new screen. But we see this all the time where people will actually go and refurb old screens, and then they'll polish up the front and stick some plastic wrap on it and then kind of sell it as a separate unit. We see it all over eBay all the time, and I see it a hell of a lot with MacBook screens, especially when I was going and replacing the screen on mine. They'll just take an old panel and they'll try to get it up to snuff, buff it up, and then slap some plastic wrap on there and call it a day. But it wasn't, the thing is I wasn't bothered so much that the unit arrived damaged. I was bothered by his mannerisms and his unwillingness to help with anything. And so he was just kind of an asshole straight from the get-go and stuff. And the way that his knees were jerking as soon as I went ahead and said, oh, hey, I'm having an issue. What can we do about this? It was pretty ridiculous, I think. So I went on to talk about screen defects and what triggers it and how it gets worse and everything else. And, I just more or less try to pacify the situation, because I realized very quickly that I was going and dealing with an aggressive seller. And I even point out that I don't really understand what there is to gain by saying that I didn't have it looked at. There's no real reason to attack me like that. I did call him out on it. And I also pointed out that I was trying to get an amazing gift for my child in the door, and a part of that entails making sure it's in serviceable shape. If the screen's torn up, to the point where it has a lot of discoloration and stuff, if the back panel is torn up to the point where it doesn't have registration, if it locks up whenever you go to charge it, that's not really serviceable, at least not to me. So I point out that nobody's out to get him. I just wanted to go and get a gift for my kid, more or less. And then I point out the fact that we have numerous repair shops in my area, and it's not hard to get a walk-in, with William's shop being about 5 minutes away. If I'm going and walking, it's not hard to get to him. And then all the other shops, the 8 other shops that we have are only 2 minutes away from him. We literally have an entire district that is nothing but repairs. And I point out that he's been in business for 30 years. Bill had been doing this for so long. He does it part-time now, but he has so much experience under the belt that most issues, he's kind of in that era where most issues, if you walk in and you say, hey, what is this? He can actually diagnose it really, really quickly. He'll say, hey, it's a busted panel, or it looks like you have a busted PCB controller board, or he's really, really good at it. He has his own Vita and he services them quite often. Most of the time, it's thumbstick replacement and battery replacement, as the hardware is actually surprisingly durable, but he has seen issues like this before. And I pointed out basically all the other issues and, and the damage and stuff. And I just gave him a detailed breakdown, and I was talking about how the stickers are peeling and everything else, and how I had to flatten it, and that I wasn't really worried about it because they're just stickers. They don't really enhance the functionality of the unit or impair it if they're falling off or peeling off. I mean, peeling it off is kind of annoying, I think, but trying to put it back on is even worse. I'm willing to go and put with a little bit of care, put a new label on it. It wasn't an issue, but I digress. So I point out to see if we could get parts as well as everything else, and that's when I had started leaning into going and having it, after talking about the issues and stuff, going and seeing about getting it returned, repaired, replaced. And I pointed out that I reached out because I'm asking for help to see what can be done to resolve this, because while I don't like things like this happening, I understand that there's bumps in the road and that you need to work through them sometimes, which, that's just a fact of life, I think. It's just literally how it is. And, we're given challenges so we can go and seize them, not generally so we can go and run from them. And so I give them the option of repair, exchange, refund. And I wanted to continue working with the seller because I hate it when transactions end badly. I view it largely as a failure to communicate, and I'm not really a huge fan of that. And I state that I'm open to any of these. However, what I'm not open to is being attacked when I reach out. There's no reasoning to it. I could understand if I was being rude or outright disrespectful, but I wasn't. I was simply asking, how do we fix this? Reasonable question, I think. And then I set the expectation for the body and stuff, having a little bit of wear, but I emphasized that it still needs to be functional. And I went ahead and sent him a screenshot of a standard lock screen versus what my lock screen looked like, again, since he didn't really seem to be understanding it too well. And then the sticker that we managed to find that had the serial on it that peeled off, and it had peeled off and curled up, and it was in the bottom of the box beneath all the packing peanuts. And then I had documented, since he had stated earlier that all the serials are tracked, I documented the fact that these stickers were literally peeling off the bottom of my unit, since the unit was so damn old and it was in extremely rough shape. So I asked him, I flat out tell him that if he needs any more documentation, just let me know, please, because I'm still trying to be helpful to this guy. And so he says, send it back and I'll refund you. I'll refund you and shipping label over PayPal. So I say, I'll need a label, please. And he's like, I can't issue. You're in USA. Show receipt and I'll send it to you via PayPal. So I said, okay, I'm going to have to ship this on my own. And then he's like, I'll replace it and send it back. And then he asks me, why did you take off the serial number label sticker? I didn't. When I took the unit out, it was peeling off on one side already when it came to the back panel sticker, and then I managed to wedge that down, and then the other two had peeled off. I don't know where the model number sticker went, but the serial sticker was curled up and sitting in the bottom of the box beneath the packing peanuts. So documentation, see what he says, documentation I would need is proper using the tester apps, not these screens. I honestly don't know what he's talking about here, because you're going to see later with the rather scathing response to my review that he left, where he tries to say I requested that you use tester apps, but there was no tester apps on the Vita at all. As far as I could tell, it was a bunch of homebrew, which was not requested at all. It was like a bunch of homebrew games and stuff instead of just the games list that I had requested for all the units. And so he says that he would need is proper using tester apps, not these screens. I'm like, okay, whatever. And so then he says, ripped it open as well. God knows what you did there, but I'll replace, just send it back. I'm assuming at this point that he's trying to make the claim that I had it physically taken apart, but it was never opened. It wasn't really needed given the nature of the complaint. I mean, we don't really need to open the Vita to see that the screen is screwed. We don't need to open the Vita to see that the back panel had heavy amounts of damage to it. And I was pretty damn annoyed with that because I could tell that this guy was just kind of talking out of his ass at this point, but I was trying to be the better human being, so I just kind of kept going with it. And so he goes, and I'm going to go ahead and skip that entire address I just scrolled by because that's his info. And so here he says, use USPS first class, not express or priority, thanks. I responded back with, I didn't remove it. I found the barcode label on the bottom of the box under the packing peanuts. I searched the box for the other sticker, but couldn't find it. We looked for an hour, which we did. I was all over that fucking box. I pointed out that the adhesive on the barcode sticker barely sticks, so I placed it to the side since I couldn't keep it attached to the unit, which, I planned on, I did send it back with the unit when I went ahead and shipped it out. I pointed out that I tried to reapply it, but it wouldn't really stick. We had to retrieve the system info by going and plugging it in to have it read. And no, it hasn't been opened. I flat out tell him that he's more than free to inspect it on arrival. I don't mind. The sticker is going to be in its own section, so it's not lost when it's shipped back. I finally got the sticker on the back to stick again, and then I asked him, do I need to take my PSN, which I later stripped off once I, via the website, once I figured out what this guy was playing at. But I asked him, do I need to take the PSN off the unit before it's sent? Does it need to be wiped? And he's like, wipe and destroy. Do not wipe and destroy 10 hours of work, please. Just send it back. Okay, so then that is literally, that thing that we just scrolled past really quick was the address and stuff, as well as the IOSS number for declaration for exports, as well as the tariff number that would need to be on the customs form and everything else. And he said this would be preferable. And so at this point, I learned that this guy is not in the UK at all. He's actually from Europe, and he's based out of Budapest. And so I said, not a problem, sir. I'm going to be sending all of it back in case you would like to do some testing. I'll check the addresses to see about the cost, and it would be sent with tracking so you don't have any issues keeping track of it all. I'll get it wrapped up and sent. When it's sent, I'll deliver the receipt to you for your records because, I'm just trying to reassure this man. And so it says, cheers, mate. Please use the CN22. And then, he's got all this stuff and the IOSS and the tariff codes and everything. And at this point, he's like, please send it to Hungary. So first he wanted me to send it to the UK. Then he wanted, he had a bunch of addresses in the UK. Then he wanted me to send it to Hungary. And so he wanted to be on vacation. So I say, okay, no worries, thanks. Please put the following visible into the line, which we're going to be skipping over that. And so I went ahead and I verified all of it. He said correct. I said, good stuff. It'll be out at first light. And then I went ahead and I sent the complete receipt as well as the customs form. I went with the cheapest that they had at the time I was shopping around. And UPS did not want to touch it because they consider Hungary a hostile zone. I asked them why, and they didn't have an answer for it. Since it had a battery in it, FedEx was quoting me $120, which I was like, I'm not spending that. And then when I had taken it down to USPS, I had specifically asked, okay, what is the cheapest that you have with tracking? And so the cheapest that we have with tracking is $68. I said, God, really? And she was like, yeah. I said, why? And she said, because to countries like Hungary, we don't do first class mail tracked. We don't. It normally goes untracked, and then whatever happens. If you want a tracking number, we're going to have to send it priority. I said, oh, fucking hell, I don't want this to get lost in the postal, so I opted to go and have tracking put on it. That way he couldn't make the claim of, you never sent it, things like that, so I was like, okay. The total cost ended up being $68 and some change, and he was just kind of losing his mind. Honestly, 70 was the cheapest. Jesus, I'm already down on this sale and I need to ship it back for 50, and then he says, for fuck's sake. And so he literally had requested that I use USPS. He had requested that it be tracked. And then he turned around and, requested that it goes all the way to Hungary. And so I was just kind of sitting there going, okay, dude, you're requesting all this stuff. I'm going and I'm accommodating it. This is what the bill looks like. And he was really upset. And so he says, I don't know how my customers for service can send it for 30. It doesn't have tracking. That was the caveat. If he wanted it mailed via first class mail, it would have not had tracking put on it going to another country. And then there was additional problems when we were filling out the customs forms. We were encountering additional problems as well because the man did not want to give me his full name, which was required for the package to be sent. Like for the first name, he went ahead and he gave it to me, but they would not let me put just M for the last name. And so we had eventually gotten around it by doing M dot. And that's how we got the package out the door. The IOSS was documented correctly. All the tariff codes were documented correctly and stuff. And so, his other customers didn't ship it with any sort of tracking. So what wound up happening was I was like, with this guy already doing sketchy stuff, it's reasonable that it does have tracking on it just for the sake of him not being able to say, oh, well, you never sent it. I never got my item back. So he says that he hopes that he won't get charged upon delivery too. He'll end up using hundreds. The proper IOSS codes were on it as well as the proper tariff codes. And so I popped around. I said I shopped around. FedEx was 120. UPS refused to ship it because they have it labeled as a hostile zone. With USPS, it was about 70. The proper IOSS is on the side of the box, and I basically go down the entire breakdown for the shipping and stuff. And then I had to pay additional taxes on it as well because we have new policies over at USPS with priority mail and stuff, especially if it's being listed as an export. I had to label it very specifically on the customs forms just to go and get it out the door to get it back to him. So at this point, I realized that this guy's just going to be hostile for the entire encounter and stuff. And I realized that we were both going to be losing on shipping, constantly mailing this thing back and forth. And that a lot of this really could have been avoided if he would have taken time to vet the hardware, look at the screen, check the back panel and stuff. But if he's sitting there telling me I ran all these diagnostics and stuff on it, the question I find myself asking is, okay, you ran these diagnostics. Why didn't you catch any of this? A lot of it is glaring. How the hell did you miss this? And so that directly tells me that this man most likely does shoddy work. And so I pretty much break down everything, and instead of sending it back, I was so fed up with this guy's behavior and his mannerisms that I said, it would just be best to just refund it. And I point out that it's been nothing but hostility since I started this process, and I've overall lost my taste for it. It's not what I'm living for, in all honesty. I don't mind going the distance for people, but I just don't feel like a hostile interaction every time I open my messages. Just refund it and be done with it, please. I don't need to be attacked and called a liar every time we speak to each other. So he lies and says, nobody called you a liar. I just don't know why you're in a hostile zone, when this man had been trying to discredit me since I had reached out. He tried to discredit me about the screen and say that it was normal. Then he tried to discredit me when I said I took it to a technician. He had a pretty long habit of going and doing this, while I was going and trying to get this damn thing, squared away. I was pretty disappointed with it. So he said, my couriers asked triple because of your hostile zone, so I had to go for FedEx. I looked into the Hungarian postal, and it turns out that their rates are going up because of inflation, and the government has routinely raised the rates on shipping, and that America is not listed as a hostile zone for Hungary in general. So he lied about that, and then he said most of the time office workers are lying, as been told by many customers. I have never in my life met anybody that said that USPS lied to them about shipping rates, and then everything on the receipt is literally documented. Every single charge and code and everything is literally on the export forms, and it's also on the receipt. So it was really kind of weird because I can tell that he was just trying to win an argument at this point while I'm just trying to get service, and it just seemed really, really bizarre. And so he said that he spent loads of hours with my very special request, and you'll have it back after I fixed it, and we can be over with it forever. Lesson learned. He was just being an asshole at this point, and I didn't really feel like humoring it. It wasn't great. So he said that he still has no idea how to put your area to a different posting zone. Didn't even know there are hostile locations as yours is in America. Is it's never happened in over 4 years of selling, and I should have asked for way more, but I'll figure this out with Etsy. And so it was just getting kind of weird. We were actually kind of screwing up on Etsy from the start, I think, because I paid $325 after everything was said and done for the unit, and I expected to pay the full amount up front, as a single charge. When I had reached out to him and we had started setting up this work order, I said, okay, I want to pay it all in one go. This is a custom batch of games. If you, feel that it's a lot of work, let me know so I can pay it all in one go. First, he told me, don't worry about it. And then afterwards, when he was done and it was on its way to me, he said, I would like a tip. It turns out that trying to do transactions outside of Etsy's ecosystem is against the TOS. They do not like that. That's actually why the first beginning section of the messages is missing, because he posts like his email and like his payment information and everything else. And apparently you're not supposed to do that on the Etsy platform. And so I didn't mind tipping him, I don't mind paying for good work. But he was pushing extremely hard for a tip right off the bat, saying that he did good work and that he wanted the tip. And I had replied back and I said, yeah, I would like to get the units first to see, how they're doing and to address any issues. I had already paid I'd have to say I already paid like 95% of the cost up front, with the rest of the cost being the tip that he wanted and stuff. So I just kind of sat there and I was like, okay, well, I've already paid for the service in full. The tip is what you get for doing a good job, essentially. And so with all of the units having hardware issues, and then with it just being a ROM dump of a bunch of stuff that we had never requested, it wasn't looking like he had taken into consideration any of what we had wanted for any of the units and stuff. There was a lot of homebrew games, which I wasn't really looking for. I was fine with like the system tools and stuff that you have to have, like Vita Shell and everything else. I was okay with that because that is a part of modding it. But there was a bunch of other emulators as well, which I did not want or need for any of the units, and it just wasn't really that great, so we were just kind of going and struggling through it, and the order wasn't really listened to very well. So he just kind of continues to be an asshole about this, and then he tries to say IOSS code covers all your taxes to Europe, so you've been tricked as well, I see. And the IOSS covered some taxes, but not others. The taxes that I was paying on this were local to my state. Local to what we have going on here in the United States. And I guess that he just didn't understand that. I mean, the IOSS covers him on his side of the thing, and the IOSS number that was put on there designated that it was an OLED panel. That way he doesn't get taxed all to high hell, since Hungary has really, really gnarly European taxes attached to them. And then the tax code as well also had a separate designation that signified that it was handheld entertainment and everything else. And the total value of it was about $50. So he was trying to avoid taxes on that as well, which makes sense when you have taxes that high. So he proceeds to try to double down on saying that I've been tricked, but I had spent 2 hours down there at the postal service going and learning to write the address well, because Europeans write their addresses a little bit differently compared to us Americans, especially when it comes to like postal zip codes and everything else. And so we learned that. And then with me having extremely low vision, I also had to go and get help with the forms. And then, they went through the box, of course, checked everything. It was a very, very kind of extended process. And so, but he continues to double down on it. But USPS had already explained this to me. Like, they had literally broken down where all the money's going. And then the USPS as well has had various rate increases. I know that the PO box went from being like $20 a year all the way up to like 75 and some change. Stamps have gone up. All their boxes that you can buy, like all the flat rate boxes, those have gone up. Everything on USPS's side of things have just been kind of going up with inflation because they're trying to maintain some sort of viability, which, I get it. So I explained to him that I haven't been tricked. They explained that the new policies with the USPS, as I spent 2 hours, and I pretty much go over everything, and I was just kind of tired of having a hostile interaction at this point. I stated that I was moving on from it, and yada yada. So he said, I wonder what what are those new rules, because we never learned about all right, no problem. And like this guy's English, I can tell that English is not his primary language, which is fine, but it's rough to read sometimes. And so I was trying to be the better person still, because I understood that he was upset about the shipping amount. So I sat down with my girlfriend's daughter, and I just kind of said, hey, what do you want to do? Because with Etsy's policy, if you file a complaint, you get back all of it if you can prove it. So, with shipping, they wanted a receipt and everything else, but I was like, okay, I don't want this guy to eat the total cost, because he's going to be losing money, I'm going to be losing money, so he's already having to eat the cost going and sending it back. I should probably consider eating the cost sending it out. So I sat down, I talked to her, I was like, is this fair? Do you feel it's fair? And she's like, yeah, that's fair. And so I say thank you. I sat down and talked to my daughter about it, and we decided that we'd just like the original purchase price of $329.80 USD back. Regarding the 68 USD that was spent to send it back, I'm not going to be requesting reimbursement on that. It seems both of our countries are changing a lot, and it's something to think about. I don't know why we have shipping companies that designate other countries as hostile. I just kind of say, oh, hey, it's another country. Calling a country hostile is just rude, I feel. At this point, it's about mitigating loss. I expect both of us will be taking a hit. I don't know why the drop fee for Hungary is so high when it comes to your country's postage. I was made aware of this when I was at the USPS. We took time to document the IOSS correctly, as well as the tariff numbers, because a mistake on those is costly, and it's not something that I wanted you to take a hit on. That's why past a certain point I realized that shipping is rough, and I made the choice to refund. Shipping in general with tariffs and other things would have drained us both, and it didn't seem right. That's why I'm not requesting the 68 back. It becomes too much of a loss for both at this point. To answer your question, yes, a lot is changing and most are not aware of it. I know that on my side of things, the president that's coming into office wants to have tariffs on everything that's not us. It's a bad idea and has thrown us into a panic state, and it's going to destabilize our economy, affecting prices and shipping. No one agrees to it. Regarding the USPS, yes, a lot has been changing with it. Inflation is kind of bad right now, so prices of the USPS have been going up year after year. The post box that I use went from $20 a year to $72, which realistically after taxes, it's more closer to $76, $77. As they try to wrestle it, ground couriers have followed suit as well. Things I'd send through FedEx that used to cost $12 now cost $19. And then I tackle the EU side of things and talk about their various systems and tariff codes and how they've been being revised every 3 months. And, it's just kind of, it was me trying to pacify the situation still, because this is not the experience that I had wanted. And so I say, with that thought in mind, everything was documented correctly to mitigate as much loss as possible, and it should be there very soon. You can track it via the number provided on the receipt. What is the time frame for the refund looking like? I went ahead and I did not hear from him for like a very long time. Like, he was just kind of sitting on it a fair bit. So I have a tendency to leave reviews for everything, and you're going to see that here in a bit, but he had gotten upset because I had left a 1-star review. And so that's going to be its own separate section that's going to be outside of this browser. And I didn't hear anything. And finally, he's like, in a week after I got it, thank you for the detailed feedback. You're a great chap. And so I say, thank you. And so then he gets upset because I left a negative feedback. And like, I get it removed anyway after I cancel your order. It will be gone. That's not how Etsy works. They keep the reviews there. So I said, that's fine, everything's documented, the order's already delivered, so there's no canceling it per se. I thought of that ahead of time since sellers have a tendency to abuse the system. I had started paying attention more to this man's actions and mannerisms about halfway through this entire process, because I realized with him being willing to discredit people in general and kind of lie very heavily, it wasn't really getting any better. So he gets mad and he said, "You don't know how my seller platform looks and what I can do on it, do you? You don't know how Etsy works, do you? Thinking ahead of time. Not a smart You not smart at all, please stop messaging me." And so that more or less was pretty much the beginning of the end for him, because I literally document everything. And so we're going to go ahead and open this up in QuickTime. VLC does not like it. And we're going to go ahead and watch it. So we're going to go ahead and scroll down a little bit. And so I say that I commissioned this Vita to have a specific game set for my daughter. Adam agreed. When it arrived, the games were there, but the screen had a huge amount of defects, which I did include a photo for. Amount of defects on the entire left side with other hardware-related issues. I reached out to him for help and sent photos, and it was instant hostility, trying to tell me nothing was wrong. I explained to him that I took it to a repair shop to confirm the issues, and he stated that I didn't. Our message history is nothing but him being extremely disrespectful and attacking my credibility while I tried to work with him to resolve the issue. Eventually I said that's enough, and I opted to mail it back. It cost me 68 USD to do so, and I was attacked over that too, floating the idea that I was lied to by the USPS to hike the price up. I was not. It was the bare minimum. Just avoid the shop. This was the first ever negative review that I had ever left on Etsy. You know, like all of my transactions from Europe in general have always been really, really good. I get a lot of custom leather work done and stuff, and it's always been premium all the time, especially orders from Ukraine. I've had quite a few orders from Russia as well to have custom things made, and I've never had an issue with it. I think I had a blip in shipping one time, but it wasn't super bad or anything like that. We worked together and we got through it. And so he replied back with, it's actually kind of funny, like he apparently has this habit of doing this shit to everybody that leaves a negative review. He'll claim that they're a fraudster, and you'll see that as we scroll down. But he says, "Dishonest fraudster wants everything for free, but when you need to pay up for your 400 plus game request, you're trying to make up excuses." I already paid up for it. I paid the entire amount in full, aside from the tip he wanted via PayPal. So it's not like he was getting swindled or anything like that. The 400 plus game request is a myth. I requested 160 PS1 games, followed up with 50 PSP games, and then 40 Vita games. It was nowhere near 400 plus games. The ROMs that he had dumped on there, I did not want. I just wanted the list that I had mailed him, and he failed in that regard. And so he's like claiming that I'm trying to make up excuses. I don't see how. He's already been paid. The only thing that he never saw was the tip that he was hounding me for the entire duration of the transaction. And then states had to state lies about the screen. The screen obviously is not a lie. I have multiple photos of it. And that the technician with no tools diagnosed and said half the screen is not working. We did not say that it was not working. We said that it was damaged, which is the case, as you can see from the photos. And you don't need tools to go and recognize the fact that the back touch panel is not registering touch correctly. You just need a finger, a game, and a couple minutes of your time, and the willingness to poke around in different zones. So it was really kind of obnoxious, and he was trying to double down on his bullshit. And then, I did send him pictures of the lock screen. And, because the normal lock screen did not have these just fucking massive ass gashes on it, and it was pretty insane. And then, hold up. I'm screwing up here. Give me a minute. Got me scrolling back down again. But then a problem with touchpad, which, yes, the back touchpad was pretty screwed up. I had never claimed that there were any problems with the battery, just that it was locking up, which is kind of weird because, it's not the same thing. Never said that there was a problem with the games. Even when you go and look back at the review that I had left, it says all the games were there. Everything was fine. It was mainly a hardware issue. So he says that he told me to run tester apps. What you refused. There was no tester apps on the Vita at all. It blatantly stated that, the message blatantly stated that he wanted to go and get it back so he could run his diagnostic on it. And then yammers on about how support, or how I tried to get it on a discounted price and how support won't accept my made up lies. Fun fact, they had access to all of my messages. It was pretty fucking insane because when I had reached out, which we're going to get to here in a minute, they were asking me a hell of a lot of questions. I said, yeah, you have access to all of it. And so he says that he was forced to get his item back before I try something else. I didn't force pretty much anything. I was like, hey, I'm going to give you the option. And as he continued to go and come at me in my DMs, I said, hey, I would just like to send it back, please. This is getting fucking ridiculous. And so I wasn't trying anything with it. It was just damaged hardware and I wanted to return it. So not you who changed his mind. I'm not a guy, I'm trans femme. And I didn't change my mind on the unit. The unit arrived damaged, and I was more than willing to go and do an exchange, but he just kind of kept behaving like an asshole. And so he states for shipping, you also went and got priority, not a first class. He stated he wanted tracking. First class does not have that in Hungary, so I literally had to go and spend that amount of cash going and getting it back, which, again, I don't mind doing it, but if he would have stopped being an asshole for more than 5 seconds, I think that I could have managed to work through it with him, and I would have been more than happy to reimburse him a little bit, but when you go and you behave like that, you're not really willing to go and tolerate that at all. So he tries to do the comparison of spending 2 hours in a post office versus 10 minutes at the so-called technician. He, again, opens his mouth very widely and kind of displays his stupidity in full force by stating that, it's a so-called technician. Bill has been in business, 30 plus years, and he is widely regarded as the best. He owns his own chain. He does it really well. They don't do awful work or anything like that. There's a reason why his customers keep coming back. And so it was really ridiculous because Bill gave me his time as a courtesy to go and look at something that was very easily evident to notice. It was very, very noticeable. And so you don't really need to tear a unit apart at that point, and I'm not going to keep constantly hounding this man for the sake of appeasing this guy that is selling sketchy hardware. It's just not something that is going to happen. So he says, top yapper and liar reported and banned. Well, his report went nowhere, as we're going to talk about here in a minute. And then I'm not banned on Etsy. I'm still there. I don't plan on using his shop ever again because the work is subpar. But when you go ahead and you filter out all of his negative reviews and stuff, you can literally go and see how he treats people. This guy on September 20th went ahead and said, ordered on September 1st. It's now, I guess I misspelt it. It's now September 20th, and my order hasn't been sent. Wasn't given any communication as to why until today, 3 weeks later. It says payment still pending. After 3 weeks, dispatch only after cleared payment. Sorry. Makes sense. And then we don't even know if he's really being honest or not, but with the way that he lies and stuff. And then this guy here was like, haven't got my package yet, and I ordered it weeks ago. As the seller, spotty on communication, still hoping that I get my Vita soon. So far, nothing. And then that was mailed January 5th, 2024. And then he comes back in January 21st, 2024. And so he attacks this guy and says, avoid buyer at all cost. And then literally low-grade doxes him by going and using shipping tools. I guess he's trying to confirm that it's been delivered and stuff, but when you go and you confirm something like that, it tells you where the person's at. So he's literally low-grade doxing him by posting this bullshit link. And it was just really, really awful. And so this is the other guy that literally had left a negative review. He didn't have the balls to come at this guy. Adam was rude and not professional. I have no idea why the hell people are misspelling stuff. But then again, I can't really form words or speak straight, so it's, I can't really say too much. So he was not very professional, giving excuses about how late the item would show up, and it finally showed up 13 days late, which that was the case with my package as well. It was late as hell. System is in pretty good condition, but still need to go through games to add and delete Vita games that are more my preference. Overall, terrible experience. Read his other low scores to see how he treats unhappy customers. This guy's a little bit ahead of the curb. So, scrolling down, it was really kind of wild. And he says, never received my item, got a refund from Etsy, and then he attacks this guy, calls him a fraudster. That seems to be his favorite slang of choice, and then posts a IBB link. And the weird thing is Etsy does keep track of this shit. And so then we have this poor person right here that blatantly points out that seller isn't truthful in pictures, will send a completely different model than in the pictures. You're a fraudster and a liar, and asked for full refund without sending my item back. I'll report you to all the authorities. From my experience, yeah, the item pictured in his listing sure as hell wasn't what I received, because all the pictures that he has up there, they all look very close to like new, more or less, and mine had looked like the entire back of it looked like it came out of a fucking blender. And so he goes and he tries to say, you asked for full refund without sending my item back. I'll report you to all of the authorities. And it's really weird because Etsy normally steps in, and when they step in to handle stuff like this, they normally make sure that the seller goes and gets it back. And this is exactly why I had put tracking on the package. So moving on down, it blatantly states the charging cable it came with charges slower than if you used any other cable. Plus the PS Vita had gotten a stuck pixel, so it doesn't go away, which is super distracting, and you can't do anything about it. Also, the Vita has two light scratches on it. Oh god. It's a used Vita. Obviously, there will be wear and tear marks, and I can hardly, and he spells believe wrong, the pixel problem since you left a review after 2 months, and all my systems going out prior testing. Obviously, mine didn't go through testing. Jesus Christ. The provided cable doesn't do anything with how fast you charge your Vita. It does, because cables do have limits. So it depends on the bandwidth of the cable. Some do, some don't. They are rated in wattage for a reason. Probably you just salty because you dropped it. So he goes out of his way to just go and insult these poor people, and it wasn't really that great. So this poor guy was like, very poor customer service, didn't respond to any questions. I haven't received the Vita yet, although I paid for it on the 30th of June. Buyer beware. And apparently that was on July 9th. And he says you never asked any questions regarding your order, and you was informed why your order hasn't been picked up by Royal Mail. Your statement is a pure lie. And again, Etsy can go into your messages, and they go and they check all this crap, like they really do and stuff. So it just kind of kept getting worse from there, I think. So what happened as an end result? Well, obviously he wanted to just kind of keep his lying habit up and stuff, and so I had reached out to Etsy support, and I said, okay guys, this is what we have going on. I initially didn't want to go and charge him for the return shipping because I was trying to be kind. I know in Etsy policy, it states that when you go and you have issues and stuff, that, they have to refund you your total cost spent. So this guy's being extremely disrespectful, extremely hostile in almost everything that he does. What do we do about this? Etsy support was actually really chill about it. The refund was kind of a multi-stage process. And first they were like, well, you're going to be getting back your total purchase price. And I said, that's fine. Thank you. I do appreciate that. And then finally they said, okay, do you have a receipt for, your shipping? And I said, yeah, this was the cheapest that they would go and give me and stuff. And this is what it equated to because it was going all the way to Hungary and, it had to have tracking and everything else. And so I just kind of sat there and they were really, really chill about it. And they said, okay, well, you're going to get your original purchase price back. As for the amount you spent on shipping, we're going to go ahead and we're going to give that to you in the form of a gift card. And, it wasn't really ideal, but, at least they're trying, and I get that. So I was like, okay, that's fine. And then so reporting them as a whole was kind of a multi-stage process. They went ahead and everything went back through financially and stuff, and now I'm shopping around for another person to do all the work. And but as far as his account, he was showing that he was willing to manipulate the system to go and try to keep his reviews in check and everything else. And so apparently Etsy looks down on that. I flat out asked support. I was like, hey guys, do I need to give you permission to go and look at these messages or anything? What do you guys need from me to go and document this? And the woman had stated, we have everything that we need. And so she said, go ahead and report his response, which I did, but the automated system they have in place seemed to think that I was treating him as a buyer and not a seller, so that's kind of out of my hands. And then he had received a hell of a lot of penalties for his behavior in the DMs. So yeah, he more or less had everything nailed to the floor for him because he wanted to be an asshole about things. And so I think it's kind of weird how a lot of people, especially especially sellers on Etsy, they kind of sit there and say, you got to watch out for customers, you got to watch out for customers. Meanwhile, I'm over here dealing with crap like this. And so it was really shitty. It was not an ideal experience for me at all. Apparently, I was I was not the only one that had issues. But yeah, the guy was extremely hostile. And it just wasn't really getting any better. It was just kind of one of the worst experiences I think that I had ever had, but I was glad the support was actually there to say, hey, we got you and stuff. So his account is more or less getting raked over the coals and stuff, and it's not really going to be ending, from what I understand, it's not really going to be ending very well for him. And so, yeah, I know a lot of people kind of worry about buyers being fraudulent and stuff, but there are a hell of a lot of sellers out there that you have to worry about as well. And when you go and place reviews and stuff, they can and will go and lie about things. Oh, sorry about that. I was taking a sip. But yeah, they can and will go lie about things a fair bit. They will sit there and say, oh, hey, you wanted this, and this, and didn't want to pay me, and all this other stuff. And I was really just kind of disappointed by it because I realized very quickly that he didn't really have a lot, if any, integrity. And so, yeah, you do have to watch out when going and checking things out on Etsy. It's definitely becoming a problem and stuff. I understand that there are some buyers out there that can be difficult and hard to please. And, I've always been straightforward with all of my requests, and I'll even reach out and ask sellers what they think is best, especially when ordering leather book covers and stuff in terms of proper measurements. That way the cover actually fits, or, belts, because everybody's different, right? But, there's just, I think with Etsy as a whole, the entire ecosystem it has, there's no system in place to report abuse in general. When you go to your messages and stuff, it's just, hey, you can report this as spam, but in the regard of going and actually making sure that, sellers are not doing sketchy stuff, they don't really have a tendency to pay attention to it unless you crawl up support's ass, which is actually quite bad. But yeah, that was my experience with it and stuff. He really just kind of set the bar, I think, for how low a transaction could be. And up until this point, I think that I had been having pretty good experiences on Etsy. But I think that he just kind of, when I went ahead and, tried to go and grab up these Vitas and stuff, he just kind of sat there and just kind of kept going lower and lower and stuff. And then was willing to lie about it in the review process about, all sorts of oddball shit that just didn't even really make sense. So, yeah, they went ahead and they covered me and stuff. I got back pretty much everything that I spent, albeit some of it's in the form of a gift card, but that's all right. So he thought that past a certain point with that end message, he thought that by canceling the order that I would no longer be able to go and report a problem with the order. But it turns out if you reach out to support via chat, you explain the situation, what he is doing is largely considered a form of fraud and abuse. So his entire existence, as far as I could tell, was a lie. He claims that he's in the UK. That's a lie. He's way the hell off in the middle of fucking Europe. Him going and trying to plagiarize his product as something that's near mint was also a lie. Just the way that he was going about composing himself wasn't really that great. And so, it's important that you pay attention to things like this because a lot of people, when they go and they get on Etsy, they have a tendency to think that nothing bad is ever going to happen or people are not out to get them. They have this is just a mom and pop shop, small business mentality. And what they don't realize is there's a lot of people on the platform going and committing obscene amounts of fraud on a regular basis. Like Etsy used to be a marketplace where you could buy handheld. Well, obviously I tried to buy a handheld where you can buy handmade goods and stuff. And now it's just a lot of drop shipping and reselling. And it really just kind of reminds me a lot more of eBay with much worse regulation in place. So yeah, that was pretty much everything from start to finish. And just be careful when you're going on Etsy and stuff. It's not just buyers that do the occasional skeezy thing. There's sellers that do that shit too, especially if they think that they can abuse it and get away with it. So, for all those that came out today, thank you. I appreciate you as per usual. And until next time, be good to yourselves and each other. Take care.